stage Duayne Sanford, Dani Howard, Dan Sheed, Danniella Dee, and our very own Gabriella Swallow.
Hello, what an amazing turnout. Thank you all so much for being at this really, really important panel, because we're about to talk about the time that I remember being quite a long time ago, about breaking into the industry. And I'm so delighted to have such an amazing group of people next to me. Those with canny eyes have seen that they all start with the letter D. So, apart from me, they already have that in common. So I'd like to introduce Duayne Sanford. Yes, please, big cheers. Thank you. We've got Dan Sheed. Dani Howard. And we've got the lovely Danniella Dee. Thank you. So I am going to ask just a few questions and we'll get the ball rolling. I'm going to keep an eye on the time and make sure we've got some time for you all to ask brilliantly probing questions, because this is all for you and for the people that you may know in your life that you can also pass on this advice to. So don't be shy and keep being curious, which I think is our motto of the day. So I'm just going to start far stage left. Duayne, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you break into the industry? Let's keep it simple.
All right, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I'm Duayne Sanford. I'm a musician and music director. I got into the music industry at quite a young age. I'd say I was about 17 at the time, 18. My way in was through networking, through Facebook, through MySpace. You can tell my age by that. Also, going to the Shoreditch area, which had a lot of open mic bars and stuff like that. One of my friends used to drag me down there all the time, and we would take the bus all the way from South East London to Shoreditch, take the night bus home, and yeah, just networking, playing, meeting new people, and just putting myself out there.
Thank you. Let's pass it over to Dan. Hi.
Hi, how are we doing?
Really good. Really good. Tell us about you, Dan, because you're sort of the slight odd one out.
I am the odd one out. I'm the person wearing glasses here on the panel. But yeah, apart from that, instead of being a musician like these guys here, I'm a gig promoter. I put on gigs across London, and I've been doing that now for about several years. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I meet a lot of great artists who are just starting out doing their first shows, and a lot of them go on to bigger and better gigs as well, which is great. Yeah, it's a lot of fun meeting a lot of cool musicians.
What age did you sort of discover music as a listener, as a fan?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always had like an obsession with like discovering new artists on like SoundCloud when I was probably like 15, 16. And then from that, I ended up starting like a little music blog. It was inspired by a band called Viola Beach, and they was one of my favourite bands at the time when they unfortunately passed away. And it sort of like, it irked me a little bit of just how like much like people said they resonated with their music and loved them. And it gave me sort of like a desire really to just like, just like share musicians that I like, and like I got some friends involved with the blog, and from that I just fell into doing gigs, and yeah, I've just never looked back really. And yeah, I work for 3 different venues in London, putting on gigs there, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Amazing, thank you. Dani, tell us about your journey.
Yeah, just to sort of speed it up I went to music college, and when I got there I wanted to do film music originally, but I also loved playing in bands as well. But actually I fell in love with concert composition, and through meeting a lot of chamber groups there and a handful of competitions. I ended up getting really, really passionate about orchestral writing, and that has now become mainly what I do, as well as orchestrating for film composers, because I still just love that world. It's a lot less lonely than just the classical concert composition. So I think I fell in love with composing because of my short attention span with a single instrument. I learnt cello and drums and piano, and I just kept wanting to learn new instruments. And then it was sort of like, well, as a composer, you get to sort of play them all or learn about them all. So I think, that's how I got into that.
Thank you. Danniella?
Hi everyone, my name is Danniella Dee. I am an artist, a producer, songwriter, and DJ as well. I got into music at a young age as well. I sang in the Coventry Cathedral Choir, and I learnt to play piano classically there as well. Then I didn't go on to study music professionally at uni or anything like that, because I didn't like my A-level teacher. Put me off because I didn't like him. But I've crawled my way back to music. So I got my first kind of big gig back in 2022 with my solo stuff. It was a BBC Radio 1 big weekend, and it was in Coventry that year. And I was one of the local artists that they chose to be on the stage. So it was like huge stage, like my first ever like big 4-band gig. So I was very lucky. And then with the DJing kind of stuff, so my dad, he's very musical as well. He plays drums. He has DJed all over the world with a band called The Specials from Coventry. So very like connected with that band and the two-tone scene as well as a family. So yeah, he's got a huge vinyl collection, reggae, and I've always loved that kind of music because I've grown up listening to it. But going out and playing it as a DJ was never something that I thought or saw myself doing until I realised that how much of a lack of women there was in that kind of scene and space. I founded an all-female sound system collective called Sisters in Dub. Just before lockdown hit, we were due to launch, have a party, but lockdown shut it down. And then along came City of Culture Award in Coventry in 2021, and there was some funding put towards putting on like sound clash sessions with local sound systems in Coventry in the Midlands, and we got invited to play it, me and my 2 girls in the group, Sisters in Dub. And we got a lot of stick and slack from the other sound systems that had been invited to play because they're veterans, they've been doing it for years and years and years. And they weren't happy about us doing it, 1, because we were women, and 2, because we were inexperienced. And I don't know if any of you know anything about like kind of reggae sound clash culture, But yeah, on the night, long story short, we ended up winning and taking the crowd by storm, taking the whole night by storm. So from there, we ended up doing some big gigs, and that's how it started really with the DJing side of things. So yeah, thank you.
That's the dream story. Yeah. It's brilliant. Thank you. I'm just quite interested because I certainly know in my own experience, my career was very different from when I first sort of started dreaming about a career in the music industry. And I wonder if you could all maybe touch on that. How have things ended up compared to when you first started? You can go as young as you want. And how have you sort of reconciled that, or maybe even found peace in it, or maybe been actually inspired by that?
Hello? Yeah. I would say, I'll try and keep it short and concise. I would say from how I started I got my training very classically, in the cathedral choir. It's a lot of very old choral music, often in Latin and those kind of things. And the piano training was classical as well, doing all the grades and stuff. And it was quite juxtaposition, is that the word?
Yeah, perfect.
So I'd go to the cathedral, have my training and stuff like that. And at the time, my dad was, doing world tours with the Specials. So like, I'd go on weekends with him, and it'd just be like, watching all this craziness. So like, I didn't understand kind of how to, at that young age, how those two worlds can kind of incorporate into one thing and one person. But it was only kind of after I left university and then started, joining bands and making music of my own that I really started to appreciate all that training that I got. Even though I don't kind of play classically, it's not my field, but the training really helped give me a head start to, producing my own music and, knowing the chords, knowing the scales. And when you learn the piano, I think you can kind of direct a lot of different kind of instruments and elements in a band. So, I was really grateful for that. And I think...
very unique
a lot of it
experience
is,
too.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is from a young age. You go through the grades, and you tick the boxes, and you see yourself like kind of leveling up that way. But then as you get to when you get up and you build your own path, you realise a lot of it is about kind of what you really want and how much you're willing to go for it and how brave you are to kind of believe in yourself and do what you think is possible, It's not about reaching the highest level or highest grade or anything like that. It's really something internal, I think, which will, propel you to take you as far as you want to go. So,
Thank
that's
you.
what I'd say.
That's brilliant. Dani?
Yeah, so I think I was a bit sort of late to the party in the sense that I didn't even know I was born and raised in Hong Kong, and I'd never met a composer before, ever. It's not like here with amazing BBC Young Composer of the Year and things like that. I didn't think that was even a job. It wasn't on my radar. And all my teachers thought I was crazy going to a music college rather than a sort of university. But my parents were very, very supportive, and I just was like, I just want to write music all the time. And so I sort of jumped into that, not really thinking of the job prospects, to be honest. But as I was there, I was actually amazingly surprised about all the things that I could have gone into, whether that's publishing, just the music industry and admin, streaming services, all sorts of jobs that you can do, engraver, copyist, as with a composition degree. But as I left, I suppose I always had some form of commission stringing me along for long enough for me to build it into my full-time career, whether that was just a lot of small chamber pieces, the odd slightly larger commission, that it almost like it was the little carrot that allowed me to keep going for long enough to now be doing this full-time. But yeah, it was sort of, I thought the only way you could maybe be a composer was in the film industry, and I realized there's just so much more around that, and now I do things like sound installations for buildings and things like that. I've got a friend that writes music exclusively for theme parks, and I was just like, there's just so much use of music around the world. And yeah, I think I was opened up to quite how many possibilities you could have it, and it wasn't, in fact, narrowing me by doing a very specialist course.
Thank you.
Yeah. And almost to touch on what Dani just said, I mean, once you sort of, or for me personally, I sort of fell into music not really knowing what path I was going to go into. And I think it's only when you actually sort of like, get involved with the music industry, you realise there are so many different paths to be involved with. I think, obviously, a lot of you guys here today will probably be like musicians, but there's a lot of different paths. You've got like A&R, you've got record labels, you've got the event side that I'm in, and yeah, for me, falling into the event side, it's an area that I've been working in for like several years now, and I'm very fortunate for that. But also, you realise through meeting with other people that there's a lot of areas you could sort of go into. So with events, it's an area where you find musicians who like are more than capable of working in the industry themselves just through their experience that they make through playing shows, through meeting with other people. It's all like an experience thing at the end of the day. And the more you guys sort of dive headfirst into the industry, the more experience you'll gain, and hopefully from that, monetize working in music in some way.
Thank you. Duayne.
I think one of the biggest changes I've come across in my journey is how to get into the industry. At my time, like I said, it was Facebook, MySpace. Obviously, we still have social media now. But also, like I said, I was going to open mic nights and stuff like that, which back then, a lot of scouts used to go to find musicians. So you'd play at an open mic night, either an artist or a scout would see you, and they'd be like, oh, we want you. Now it's not quite like that. I think people are more reliant on the digital world right now. Social media is a massive thing. And like even for artists, labels are telling them, we do not care about anything else other than metrics, which is quite sad, but that's where we are. So having to adapt to that and, you know, staying on top of socials and stuff like that, it's a much bigger thing now. So it's something that we have to tighten up if we want to get into the industry. Unfortunately, that's just where we are now. You know, everything's just digital, digital, digital. So just learn social media. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, just picking up on that, it's so interesting because, of course, back in the day where you would have someone physically turn up to your gig and sort of choose you, I mean, we were talking just back there with Dan, you know, his website has a box which says submit. And if you're an artist, you can submit and fingers crossed you'll be heard. But there's nothing like a guarantee that someone is there physically in the room who's like, we've heard you and gives you feedback. So although there's a lot more music being created and being sent out there, we don't necessarily have that kind of quantifiable experience that that person will necessarily hear you. Actually, Dan, maybe that would be a good thing to pick up on about when you get these submissions, who stands out and why?
Yeah, well, so the process for me, when people, you know, sometimes people slide in the DM, sometimes they apply through my website. But the ones that stand out are the artists that have like a professional sort of like an EPK, electronic press kit. They sort of highlight their, you know, their sounds, you know, their genre, their accomplishments, if they've got any accomplishments, you know, like the radios they've been on. It also helps if you've got like, it definitely helps if you've got videos on your social media already where I can see that you are already someone who can play live, whether that be, you know, a little pub or like, it doesn't have to be like a venue with loads of people. It just needs to be like a place where I can see that you actually do have some sort of live performance or that you can play live. Because a lot of the time I'll get people reach out saying like, please can I have a gig? And it'll be like a SoundCloud link and I'll just hear their music, but I won't really know about, you know, what the setup is. Sometimes it's also beneficial as well, if you're an artist, to sort of to change your setup depending on where you're playing. So for instance, one of my venues is a double-decker bus and that's not really suited to like big band performances. So if I can see an artist who, you know, might be able to play as a duo as well as maybe like a four-piece or something, then that always sticks out to me as like, you know, an artist to consider for shows, basically, yeah.
I think that can relate very much as well to the classical contemporary world, Dani, where you maybe can't always have the commission for the symphony orchestra with 20 bass clarinets if you wanted to write that, and you have to think about what's actually viable for performances.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm always given the maximum instrumentation, and sometimes they say, oh, we're playing the planets, you can write for a girls' choir and organ and this, and I have to sort of tell myself, as much as I'd love to do that, no, it will never be performed ever again if I do that. Yeah, but also to touch on the recording thing, for many years, I was basically saving in my part-time job and spending the money on recordings of my pieces, because I knew that without a recording, I wouldn't be able to apply to any scheme, put anything on. I mean, you still can't even now put things on social media. That's one of my struggles, is because I'm not the performer. So even though I've written the piece, if I record a professional performance, I'm not allowed to put that on social media, which is a struggle. But I was spending all of my money. There was one instance, my first orchestral commission, I spent half the commission fee to get it recorded and filmed, to then find out I couldn't make it public, which was really frustrating. But I could use the private recording to apply to competitions, which, because of that, I know for a fact, got me a competition with a professional orchestra, which it was my first professional orchestra commission. And so, yeah, I think that sort of investing in the recordings, it was just a constant save, spend on that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Danniella, where do you stand with recording, how much you invested early on, and your relationship with social media? Going in there.
So the first few tracks I released didn't have any funding. It was just kind of just feeling it out, really, like testing out things, very experimental. And then I got some funding from Help Musicians. Don't know if anyone's heard of them. So I got funding through their grant to record my first EP, which came out in 2023. And that really it correlates with everything you've been saying about even translating into the shows as well. Just having that funding allowed me to record all the instrumentation, rather than producing it myself, so I could really get the vision of, the songs that I produce in a live sense, in a live recording. So it was really great to be able to do that. And I kind of just threw myself in, completely through that process, and I learnt a lot, It was really difficult and hard in the sense of there's a lot of people management involved, as the projects start to get bigger, you're trying to align everyone's diaries and schedules, to rehearse, to record. People are dropping out, people are busy, and that way things get delayed. So one thing I would say is that hard deadlines in the music industry, sometimes you can't meet them, and you just have to go with the flow and accept that things are gonna come to fruition in their timeline, and don't be upset if that doesn't happen on a set date. So that's a big lesson, a big takeaway that I took from that process of recording the EP with the funding. And I just kind of threw myself in. A lot of that budget went on the recording that I got from the funding, and I didn't have much left over for promotion and PR, so I threw a bit of my own money as well from my part-time job into that. And a lot of social media promotion and pushing on socials. And I think it's something that a lot of musicians and artists generally struggle with. I definitely do, in the sense that I love to create music. I love the process of creating it and putting it out, but I'm not a natural face to the camera content creator, which is kind of what you have to be in a lot of sense, to get that traction and following and keep that momentum going. So,
although Danniella, I must say, after looking at your Instagram, there's an amazing clip of her actually with the glue putting her own flyers up, which I found really humbling and inspiring because, again, this is not what we dreamed of doing when we first started exploring our relationship with music. We never thought we'd have to be selling gigs like that.
And I think people just seeing that, I want to bring that kind of that element from the old world and the old way of promoting music. It still has value, it still has a lot of value. And just the poster itself, that's a piece of art as well.
It's a very beautiful poster.
For people to see that, it was important for me. And a lot of people said just from that video, it was really nice to see you out there, putting your own posters up and stuff like that. And I think you've got to find a way, that kind of, those kind of videos and that kind of quote unquote content, it's easy for me to make, but I think you have to find a way to promote yourself that feels easy and not too taxing on you and your mental health particularly, because when I had my EP run in 2023 and I was posting a lot, after, I got the results, I got the metrics, I got a lot of support and new fans come in from that and following, but it really took a toll on my mental health a lot, and the whole of last year I kind of had to take a step back from it all and reassess and think about how I want to continue doing this in a way that's sustainable for me, because there's no point if I'm pushing, if you're pushing and you feel like you have to meet these numbers and metrics, and if it's affecting your art and your ability to create, you have to reassess and rethink. So
Really
it's something
important.
that's the industry is constantly changing, and the algorithm and the ways to promote are constantly changing. But I think at heart you've got to keep your sanity and keep your peace and keep your why at heart. And it's okay to take a step back and take a break. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Before I open it up, Duayne, I'm just interested. We had a quick chat before about the pros and cons of being independent and signed, and I was just wondering if you could just briefly tell us your opinion on both.
Okay, yeah. So the pros and cons. The pros of being. I'm not an independent artist myself, but I know independent artists. The pros of being independent is that you can do things the way you want to do it. There's less monetary splits, so on and so forth. I think the cons are if you've been part of the machine, and by the machine I mean labels. If you've been part of a label and you go independent, how much you spend goes up, basically. And sometimes you're not aware of what you need to spend money on. So, for example, an artist could be signed and decide they want to go independent, and then they want to go to put on a show, but they don't realize that the machine has looked after so many different things behind the scenes. So we're talking about promoters, we're talking about what was it that I said? Was it the
Talking about like what independent artists have to spend money on, they don't really.
what was it I said to you earlier? About
We were just sort of saying that with independent
about the PR, that's it.
PR,
Sorry.
it's very expensive.
Yeah, so this is a big one as well. This is why I say when it comes to social media, you have to be really on top of it, because I know a group. I'm not going to name them, for confidentiality purposes. They went independent, and they went to book a tour, and they went out on the tour. And while they were in that particular country, people were emailing them saying, or messaging them rather, saying, "When are you going back out on the road?" And they're like, "What? We're in your country right now, touring." So the problem is that because they've gone independent, they didn't book someone to do their PR. So they're trying to do it through their socials. And the thing is, when you pull away from the machine, you're essentially losing a lot of visibility. Because when you're part of the machine, you're favored when it comes to the algorithm. So when you're independent, you have to really look into what was being done for you behind the scenes and account for that as an independent artist. And that way you don't lose visibility basically online and stuff like that. And like when it comes to putting on shows, your social media reach is going to reach people. A lot of people aren't aware of this because, some people, when they come into the industry, they're not from an industry background, so it's not necessarily their fault. But, when these things happen, it's just good to share the knowledge behind it, So, yeah, I would say that's what the cons are of being independent. You actually do end up spending a lot of money, but in terms of how much money you make, and this is the pro, in terms of how much money you make and get to keep for yourself, obviously the profit margins are a lot higher.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up now for any questions. I'm sure there'll be some great ones. We've got one at the back here. Do you want to maybe say your name first? And
my name is Vincent.
Hi.
Hi.
Who's your question for?
My question, thanks guys, it's really interesting listening to you. I have a question for Dan. So I have a band called Shiny Brain Crayons, and we find it really, really hard to, let's talk about London, to get gigs with good promoters. Like very often it's, okay, you, all those deals where you have to bring 20 people and then you have to do all the work. Like, do you have any advice on how to get better gigs and find better promoters?
Yeah, for sure. There's a few things you can do. As someone who sort of works for a music venue as well as everything else that I do, it sometimes helps if you are in a band and you might know another couple of other bands. If you actually approach a venue saying, we are these 3 bands, we want to play on this specific night, that can help quite a lot, to be fair, because sometimes I'll be booking nights, for instance, where I might find a band who sound great, but I don't know what I would fit them with, like, on a bill-in. So if there's a way that you can like put on a night yourself, then that will probably go quite a long way at venues. but yeah, in terms of things like, you know, making sure you've got like a good EPK, you know, just if you, you know, outreach to venues directly, yeah, I think as well, if you can find like a bit of a community within the London musician scene, you know, like chat amongst yourselves and work out who the promoters to avoid are, who the promoters to put shows on with are. There's a couple of promoters I would recommend, apart from myself, obviously. A guy called Sam who runs nights as Bark. I think his Instagram is Bark Noise. And there is a promoter called Kevin who runs something called The Sound Sniffer. And yeah, they're both on Instagram. They're both really great promoters that I would recommend reaching out to for band gigs, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Another question. Hi.
Hi, my name's Danniella Dee, I'm a songwriter, and I just wanted to ask the panel if they thought it was still about being in London regarding music and stuff, because I know, like, Daniel's from, what did you say it was? Coventry, and I want to know if you're still there, if you're still making music from there. In terms of promoters, is it about, I mean, I've met, because I go songwriting workshops and stuff, I'm meeting people who are, literally the other week, I met somebody who flew in from Hong Kong to be in London. It's specifically to be in London because he felt it was London that he needed to be in. And I'm meeting people in bands who are still coming down to London feeling that this is the centre of it all. And if they're out in the sticks, then they have less chance. So I'm just wondering what you all thought about, is it still London-centric in spite of all the social media?
Yeah, please, go for it.
Just from obviously this is my experience and everybody's is different. But I'm born and raised in Coventry. I went to uni in Brighton for 4 years. Then I went to live in London because, you know, that same thing that you were saying, you know, you think you have to be here to kind of make it and, you know, in the thick of it and things. I didn't even last a year and I went back to Cov because I was working so much just to afford that small room that I was living in. I had no like time or headspace even to like think about music because life was so expensive and yeah, I just thought, you know what, this is not for me. So I went back, and actually it was the best decision that I made to go back to Coventry. And people think, oh, Coventry, you know, like what's there, you know? We've got a train station. What else? We've got a recording studio. What else do you need? But actually, it was the best thing in the sense that I went back, and just going back to my home and my roots and having that kind of headspace of all that business, because it's a small city, you know. We don't have that huge hustle and bustle of London, and just having that headspace back and that time to kind of recalibrate and connect back to my why again was so beneficial for me, to just create freely and fully like I'm used to doing. And that's where I made my first project, my EP, and that got the funding for that there, recorded it in Cov, and it meant so much to me, you know, to be at home and to be working with friends. So when I moved back, all my friends had left, so I went back to Cov, I had no friends there, and now I'm still there. I'm so happy and proud to say I've got friends in Cov now because of music, because I've found people, and now there's a community really building up in my city, partly because of making that EP and like just taking that step out there to do it. Yeah, so I'm so proud of that, and I'm so proud of being able to put my city on the map. And as I said earlier, the big weekend came to Coventry that year, and it was just like a really lucky time for me to be able to have that show. And I got that gig on the big weekend because I was from Coventry, because I was an artist from Coventry. So actually, being from a smaller town or city is a unique selling point if you know how to use it. You know, because people are instantly going to think, oh, Coventry, like, what's she got to say? What's that about? You know, but if you say you're from London or you're from this place and you come to London, people might switch off. So if you know how to use, you know, that USP of where you're from, you can tap into it. And Coventry's got a very rich musical history. So yeah, if you know how to tap into it and use that to your advantage, it can really be a benefit. Even to go back and to get find your feet at the start of your career, it can really be beneficial.
Brilliant.
So don't be afraid of going home to find yourself.
Brilliant question, brilliant answer. Thank you. Hi, you got one at the front here?
I know I need to. Oh, hello. I've got a loud voice anyway, so. Yeah, I've been working on some TV library music, and lucky enough, I've been trained by someone who already writes for Channel 4 and stuff. So it's really, really good. But I'm thinking, I'm looking at all the TV library music places, and some of these places have like 10,000 pieces of instrumentals on in 50 different genres, and I don't want to just submit to them, you know, and just get lost in these kind of incidental music lists. Is it better to go straight to one of the boutique small company places, and how do I approach that without looking like, you know, like, oh, this is my first time and stuff? Yeah.
So I had a library music supervisor on a panel, and they were saying they probably get 200 emails a day of submissions, and they're quite a small company. They weren't even one of the big ones. And so what she basically was saying was that when she can, she'll go through them. But basically, it sounds a bit weird, and it's counterintuitive, but keep emailing these people, because sometimes it's a case of on that day they decide to open their emails, and you were the lucky one. I really think it's a bit of a lottery and a gamble with these things. But one other thing I'd tell you is to ensure people actually don't want to hear you say, I can write jazz, I can write metal, I can write R&B. They really want a very specialist, this is what I do. And it might be piano ambient music with acoustic guitar, and just niche, and they want to hear, you know, 10 examples of that one sound world, because they'll listen to one track and they'll pigeonhole you into one box, which is not always what we want as artists and composers. But yes, I'd say email the boutique agencies, absolutely. Submit to the larger ones as well. But it's definitely a lottery and a gamble.
Yeah, because I know there's these things with non-exclusive and exclusive for the libraries, aren't there?
Yeah, I wouldn't sign a deal with a. I wouldn't go exclusive.
Oh yeah, because you can never use a track again, can you?
Yeah.
Also, is it unprofessional to sort of send it via
No,
SoundCloud? Or
I
should
don't
put
think
it on my website?
I don't think it's unprofessional to send something via SoundCloud, but also what I realised, it's great to hear you say you were searching SoundCloud as a teenager. Something that occurred to me is that actually, even if you don't have visuals, to upload something to YouTube with just an image, even if it's with the track name, a lot more people search YouTube than they do SoundCloud. So that was a weird realisation for me when I was like, conductors aren't going to go on SoundCloud, but they will go on YouTube and search.
So do like a private YouTube. Is 3 tracks enough? 3 incidental tracks, is that enough?
Yes, for small ones, but have more. I would say have more. You want 10 to 20, I think.
Yeah, then you just have to sort of sit and wait then, don't you? And
yeah.
But is it
Keep
good to
emailing.
do follow-up?
Yes,
Yeah.
and follow up. Don't be shy about following up.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We've got one last question at the back here. Hi.
Hi there. My name is Jeremy. I'm actually a student in London studying music production. Ironically, my question kind of tags along with just that question just now about, particularly for Dani, about getting, as a composer, establishing yourself as a composer. And obviously, there are many routes. You just explained avenues such as like theme parks and installations, and that's great. Well, how would you, in terms of collaborating with other composers, how would you go around doing that as a sort of way of building yourself into the industry?
I think the only way in which I've collaborated with other composers has been as an orchestrator. As a composer, personally, it's just the way I work. I don't like writing things with other composers. Some people are great at it. I don't want to do that. I'd rather split a project up and I'll do part and they do part if that's what the project requires. But I love working as a composer with sound designers, for example, to enhance what I'm doing because they've got a different role and different ears, or as an orchestrator to a composer. But I do know in the film world, there are these sort of composer bubbles of like three composers that always seem to do these large projects together, like the theme park one, they work as a 3. And so I suppose going to all these composer events and film music events, BAFTA hold events, BFI hold events, like this, you know, day-long things, I went to all of them for several years, and that's how I met the orchestrator that I then started working with, that allowed me to quit my part-time job and do music full-time. So be at those events and, find other composers.
Thank you. We have to wrap it up. 40 minutes goes very, very fast. We're going to be all around, I think, for the rest of the day. Is anyone rushing off? No, we're all going to be here, and I'm sure we can keep these conversations going. I think, just a quick summary, we've all had very wiggly lines to get into the industry, and I think we've got to embrace that. The theme that I've really taken away from this chat is this idea of community, and this is where today is so important. Supporting your fellow artists, fellow composers, instrumentalists, promoters. We do really have a much better chance if we're all in it together. So keep these questions coming. And I would just like to say a huge thank you to all the Ds. Duayne, Danniella, Dan, Dani, thank you so much.